Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a video that I'm excited to make for everybody here today. I am introducing you to my 8.2.5 Discipline Priest guide. Now you're probably wondering, with 8.3 around the corner, depending on the time that you're watching this video, why am I making a guide for 8.2.5? Well, there is a unique build and there are some changes coming to almost all of the healers in 8.3, specifically Discipline Priest as well. That's going to change the way in which this class might or may deal damage, and because of that, I wanted to introduce you guys to this build. If you do have a Discipline Priest lying around, it is by far one of the most fun healers, and on top of that, because of the essences that Discipline Priests use, and because of the Azerite traits, and a lot of the trinkets that you can get easily in this game right now for Discipline Priest with the current raid tier, I recommend this healer to all of you guys who've been wanting to pick one up. It is the most fun healer by far, hands down. You're wrong if you think otherwise. I've played every other healer. I mean, I'm just kidding, but really it is the most fun healer in my opinion because it does the most amount of damage, and it does feel like you have a lot of outs to things. You can outplay certain people. You can just do a lot on the class, and that is what I like about the class. So I'm excited to make this guide. Of course, with 8.3 coming around, I will update this guide and I will play almost all the healers in 8.3, and I will make guides on all healers and several other classes for 8.3, so stick around for that. Now, like all of my guides in the past, I'll be breaking this guide into several sections. You can find all the timestamps listed below in the description box below. I will go over our general talents first. I will then cover our PvP or honor talents. From there, I will go over our Azerite traits and essences, and then I will cover gear and stats, and then just some quick general tips in regards to comps that you can play, and just some ins and outs of the class that you might need to know before you pick it up. So hopping right into this first, you're going to see a build on my screen, the build that I like to play the most, the build that provides the most damage, the build that I find the most fun. Ignore my PvP talents for now. We're sticking to the general talents first. In the level 15 bracket, you have three options here. All three of these options have a place and a time. When you are first starting out on the Discipline Priest, you want to play Twist of Fate. This talent generally is not a talent that you want to play because the Discipline Priest play style is kind of like a snowball effect. If you've ever played League of Legends or other games, it's one of those snowball champions where when you start doing really well and you start getting ahead, you start to snowball way over your opponent, way past your opponent. It's hard for them to recover, but just in contrary, it's hard to recover as a Discipline Priest, and especially when first starting out, you feel like you're not doing any healing. Twist of Fate allows you to recover from bad situations. When you fall below, or you're healing a target below 35% health and you heal them, you're going to deal 20% increased damage or 20% increased healing. The ideal part of this is a 20% increased healing. So when you do, this DK's on you, smashing you, and you're falling really low on HP, and you're like, how do I recover from this? Twist of Fate gives you that option, but you want to transition out of this talent because it's not always beneficial. And like I said, you want to snowball, and on top of that, you don't get any value out of this talent unless the target is below 35% health that you're healing. So, but again, with Twist of Fate, it's what I picked up early on, and then from there I moved on to Castigation, which is a talent that you can take. It's a great starter talent because it allows you to do healing and damage. It fires an extra penance bolt on your penance cast. So instead of doing 3, I'll do 4 penances there, and that can be used offensively and defensively for healing or damage. And the reason why this is, in my opinion, a better talent than Twist of Fate is that you're always getting value out of it, right? You don't have to heal someone below 35% health. You're always doing extra healing or extra damage. And it's a great talent in these long kind of dampener games. It's the penance spec that people talk about. It's a safe spec. So I think this is a talent that you might pick up versus fighting. Well, again, for me, almost every game I play Schism, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a great talent to take when you're fighting perhaps like a mage or a warlock, something at range where you're able to deal that damage that's necessary to play a Discipline Priest, to have, or to be an effective Discipline Priest in the arena matchup. Castigation is that talent. So you're going to go from Twist of Fate. Once you get comfortable playing on this class and you're like, oh, I'm able to kind of, stay above 35% HP pretty easily. I'm able to recover. If I do fall below 35% HP, I don't think I need Twist of Fate anymore. You'll go to Castigation, and that will give you just constant value throughout the entire game. And then from there, I want you to move on to Schism. Schism is a super fun talent, and the reason why I'm making this guide is because Schism is currently so strong, because what it does is it fires off an ability on a 1.2 second cast, really low mana cost, and it deals a good amount of damage, but it amplifies all damage you deal to that target by 40%, and this affects currently both trinkets and it affects essences like Concentrated Flame. This is seeing some review going into 8.3, and this is why I think the class is so much fun right now, and is why I recommend it, because using these big schism goes and these big burst goes makes the class that much more fun. So, you know, you'll cast your schism, and then you can go straight into a penance, maybe into some concentrated flames, and you're getting a bunch of extra damage value. You can use your voodoo doll trinket, which I'll cover a little bit later, during this go as well, and you can deal some serious damage, which does in turn provide serious healing when paired up with different PvP talents as well. So it's a fun talent, and it's what you kind of need to play to be that snowball style class where you can roll over your opponent just because of the amount of damage you're dealing. Some games I'm dealing way more damage than the rogue that I'm playing with or the classes that I'm playing with. I'm top damage some games in 2v2 matchups because I'm just dealing so much, and it's like fighting a double DPS that does provide healing. So I really like the Discipline Priest when playing Schism, and it's a talent that I want you to try once you've, got your feet wet with Twist of Fate and Castigation. Now, moving on to the second row, the level 30 talent bracket. All of these options have their place and their time, and it's why I like this class so much. I want to play Angelic Feather as many games as I can because it gives you the mobility that your class really needs. And I have a macro for it that I'll post in the info box below, the description box below, where it places it at your feet. So you don't have to actually press Angelic Feather, click it on the ground, and then run over, right? It just places it at your feet, and I will put that in the info box below. It gives you that mobility that you need, but another mobility talent that you can play is Body and Soul. Now, the reason why I don't like Body and Soul just all the time over Angelic Feather is that Angelic Feather lasts 2 seconds longer, and it costs no mana. Body and Soul gives you the same amount of movement speed when you spec into it. So you get that 40% movement speed when you shield a target or yourself, but it costs mana, right? Power Word Shield actually will you, believe it or not. It costs 2,650 mana, which is 2.6% or 2.7% of your mana. And if you're spamming these out willy-nilly, you will go and I try not to shield unless I'm playing Trinity as much as I can because it costs a lot of mana. It doesn't provide that much absorption, as believe it or not. So it's more just to apply your atonement effect. And I don't want to spam out, spending 2.7% of my mana every time I want to speed boost myself. So I like Feather if I can play it. The reason why I would take Body and Soul, though, is for Purge Protection. When I do apply my shield, I get this Body and Soul buff, which, makes it so that if I'm Rapturing and I'm fighting a team with like Shamans or maybe another Priest that's going to be purging off my Rapture, trying to get through my shield or purge off different various effects that I might have or buffs, this allows me to have an extra row of buffs. So that way they have to purge more, spend more mana, and they might not get the effect that they're looking for. So that's why I would play that maybe versus Shamans in a 2v2 matchup or anything where I know they're going to be purging me out. I'll play Body and Soul. Now, Masochism, when paired with Twist of Fate is something that I want you to play a lot early on when fighting things like Death Knights, when fighting things like Warriors. You're going to need Masochism when you have a melee sitting on you regardless, and Twist of Fate really aids that. But again, you can play Schism or Castigation once you've moved on from Twist of Fate. But Masochism is almost a guaranteed lock-in always when fighting something that I know is going to be sitting on me. So if I'm fighting maybe like a Rogue, if I'm fighting maybe like a Warrior, a Death Knight, a Rep Paladin maybe. Rep Paladin, you can play Feather, and I'll talk about that maybe in a second. But whenever you feel like a target's sitting on you for a long time and you're going to be taking a lot of damage, you want to play Masochism because what it does is it reduces the damage you take by 10% when you cast a Shadow Man. So it's a buff that you want to keep on yourselves at all time. And Shadow Man actually, puts a dot on you when you use the effect. And it's a very minor dot that's not super noticeable, but when you spec into Masochism, instead of the dot that it places on you, it actually provides a hot instead. So that damage that you would take now heals you instead. So Masochism is a lock-in when fighting any melee class, except Rep Paladin for some cases, because you can just run away from a Rep Paladin rather easily, just to spell yourself from their slow and run in circles on a pillar. But if I'm fighting like a Demon Hunter, something where I know I'm not going to get away, Feather doesn't break you out of slows. It just increases your movement speed. So a Death Knight, I'm not getting away. Unless I get on my mount and I'm gone, they're going to be slowing me. The warrior's going to be on me the whole time. Why do I need this? I'd rather spec into Masochism. Now, for this next talent, you have the level 45 bracket. I almost always spec into, I never spec into Shield Discipline. I almost always spec into either Mindbender or Power Word Solace. Power Word Solace is a much more reliable way of getting mana. You just want to use this ability on CD because it costs no mana and it deals a ton of damage. It deals a lot of damage. If I'm fighting like a warlock, if I'm fighting like a mage, if I know I'm not getting trained in the ground by double melee in 3v3, I'm going to play Solace because it adds to my damage with Schism, with my penances, with my concentrated flames, which I'll get to in a little bit, which is all of the damage you can deal as a Discipline Priest. It's another ability that you can use that gives you mana back, 1% of your mana back on a short CD. However, if you're fighting like a double melee, if you're fighting like a Death Knight, a warrior, and any other healer, if you're fighting that comp, you're not going to have the global, the time. When I say global, I mean the time to, you know, use your Solace. You're better off either trying to get away from them, have your teammates peel for you, shield, use your globals for Shadow Mends or penances, trying to fake cast them, whatever, pain suppression. You have to avoid damage. You know, you have to pre-use your CDs to avoid damage when playing as a Discipline Priest. And if you spend that global trying to get a Solace off, that's going to be just not much of an effect at all because you're not going to out mana these guys. You're going to have to try and survive and win with a comp that adds significant pressure, like Rogue Mage Priest, for example. So if I know I'm getting trained down, I'm not going to spec into Power Word Solace. I'm going to spec into Mindbender, which Mindbender replaces your Shadow Fiend, which is an ability that you have on a 3-minute CD. It makes it a 1-minute CD, and I'm getting mana back, and that's it. I don't have to keep spending globals, spending time pressing Solace on cooldown to make sure I'm getting maximum value. I'm just going to press Mindbender, and then I'm done, and it frees up my global so I can press other things like Shadow Mend, go for Fears, whatever I have to press to try and survive, you know, a Power Word Barrier, whatever I have to use to survive that scenario. Okay, now we're moving on to the level 60 bracket, and we have Shining Force and Psychic Voice. These are the two primary options you're going to be taking. Psychic Voice is pretty much your go-to. It reduces the cooldown of your Psychic Scream or your Fear by 30 seconds, so you can get these Fears way more often, which are pretty much always required in 2v2s and just setup comps. You're responsible for landing that Fear when playing Rogue Mage. It adds another layer of CC that your comp usually needs. If you're playing things like Cupid or Jungle, you're responsible for getting these Fears off, and it's also great to bring a melee around the corner who has no trinket available and fearing them off of you so you can recover and not need talents like Twist of Fate. However, Shining Force does have its place. It is a 45-second knockback. Now remember, when you spec into Shining Force, you don't lose your Fear. It's just now a 1-minute cooldown instead. And the times that I take Shining Force are maps like Blade's Edge Arena, where I can knock them off the blades, the bridge there when I'm getting trained by double melee, or things when I'm fighting like a Death Knight, for example. And the key thing to note here is that you can use Shining Force on your allies as well. So if an A-Bomb, Abomination, that is the major Death Knight, Unholy Death Knight ability, if an A-Bomb is there and they're training you or an ally, it's really good to knock back that target, knock them away, knock back the Abomination, and it takes a long time for it to travel back and start dealing damage once again. So I use it for things like that, like a Death Knight, to knock away the Abomination, or if I want to knock the enemy off the bridge to kind of relieve a little bit of pressure, or you can always shackle the Abomination as well. But I still like Shining Force in those scenarios because it's so hard to fear a Death Knight because they have AMS and cooldowns like that, anti-magic shell, if you're unaware of what that is. Now for the level 75 bracket, you have Sins of the Many and Contrition for PvP. Both of these options have their place. Contrition is a talent, again, that I recommend you take starting out, so you can play something like this. If you're getting trained a lot, then you can move on to something like this, and then you can move on to something, you know, like this. But Contrition is great when paired with Castigation, because Castigation, you know, the whole build revolves around firing off these penances, whether defensively or offensively, and Contrition adds healing to your penances when your target or your allies have Atonement. So I like this ability a lot, especially when starting out. And then you can try out things like Sins of the Many. Your damage is increased up to 12%, diminishing for each ally affected by your Atonement. So in 2v2s, you're still getting a flat damage buff. That is great when you're trying to deal damage with Atonement, so you can provide extra healing. But once again, if you are not comfortable with this, you can play Contrition and then move on to Sins of the Many, so you can start dealing more damage. Now for level 90 and 100, it's actually simple. You are always going to play Purge the Wicked. It is a massive portion of your damage. All it does is it replaces your Shadow Word Pain with Purge the Wicked, and it's an increased version of Shadow Word Pain that deals more damage. The on-hit effect of Purge the Wicked deals damage, and the dot deals an absorbent amount of damage, a crazy amount of damage over a long period of time. It's usually my top damage depending on how I'm able to play the game. And additionally, when I do use Purge the Wicked and I, target the person with Purge the Wicked and I apply the effect and I were to cast a penance, it's going to spread Purge the Wicked to the nearest target as well. So it's a great way of spreading your dot. It's a main source of damage for you. You're always going to take this talent because remember, you heal with damage due to Atonement as a Discipline Priest, right? The more damage you're dealing, the more healing you're going to be passively doing. And if you can get a dot that's going to be dealing more damage, you're going to be healing for more on that. So think of Purge the Wicked as a renew. Finally, for level 100, you're going to be playing Lianant. I can never fucking say this word. I'm just, whatever. You're going to be playing this talent right here. It just, Atonement reduces damage taken by 3%. So it's just more damage reduction for you and your allies. And all these other options pretty much are poo-poo for the Discipline Priest. All right, now we get to the fun stuff. All of these options, most of them at least, are valuable and have a purpose as the Discipline Priest. Something that I almost like to always play is this right here, especially in 2v2s. Now, this is going to change depending if you're fighting a melee or a caster, but versus almost all melee, this is the build that I go. Right here, if I'm fighting like a warrior or if I'm fighting like a death knight, but I play with a rogue, I'll get to that in a little bit. I play something like this. These things can change a little bit, but I like playing Dark Arc almost every game. I try to play it almost every game if the opponent has a healer. So if I'm fighting a double DPS, I don't play something like Dark Arc because I know that I just have to live to win the game. I don't need, an extra burst go. Dark Arc, what it does is it increases your damage. So baseline, when you activate it, you get 15% increased damage for 8 seconds, and then every target with Atonement also receives this 15% damage buff, which is amazing when playing with a rogue. It's amazing when playing with almost any DPS, any comp. If you're playing Cupid, that being a Ret and a Hunter. If you're playing Jungle, that being a Hunter and a Feral. If you're playing something like Rogue Mage Priest, this talent is, for me, a must. It's just it adds so much value, and it really provides purpose for your role in the comp as a priest when versus a paladin or a druid. You have that extra offensive go, and I like playing Dark Archangel. But if I'm fighting something, well, let's go to this point next. If you are new to the class, like we talked about, you're gonna be playing Twisted Fate or Castigation and Masochism, this build right here, something like this or something like this. If you are new to this, I recommend you play Archangel every game starting out. You want that extra healing. So what this does is it refreshes the duration of all allies of your Atonement effect, and it increases the healing and absorption of your class by 20% for 15 seconds. So Archangel, when paired with Rapture, which is one of your main defensives, and you can spam these shields during your Archangel effect to get some crazy absorption. So this is something that you're going to need when starting out when you are new to the class, right? If you have Twisted Fate active, so you get that 20% extra healing, and you have Archangel active for an additional 20% extra healing, your Shadow Mends and your Penances are going to be monstrous. They're going to be massive. Huge healing output from this class when paired with this combo, and this is why I recommend you play Archangel, Twisted Fate, and Masochism when starting out. If you don't need Masochism, then don't play it, obviously. If you're not fighting a melee, you're fighting like a range, like a mage or a warlock, you're not going to need Masochism. You want mobility to get out of line of sight, right? Also, another talent that goes along the same lines of Archangel is Ultimate Radiance. What this does is it increases the healing of your Radiance, your power word Radiance, this heal by 250%, and it makes it a instant cast as well. The reason why you don't want to play this talent or use this ability too often is that it costs so much mana. It costs so much mana. 6,500. That's 6.5% of your mana. So if you use 2 of these back to back, you've already lost 13% of your mana. So you want to make sure that you don't get comfortable using this talent, but it is a great talent to use when starting out. If you're getting, if I'm fighting like I'm in a low rating, I'm like, trying to grind my way up, get used to this class, and I'm like 15, 16, 1700, whatever, like, I don't know what that is, Challenger or something, and I'm not good at the class yet, I'm going to play something like this if I'm fighting like a double DPS, like some Mongol, like a double Demon Hunter comp that you queue into and you're in LFG. I'm going to play Archangel, I'm going to play Ultimate Radiance, and I'm going to play Dome of Light, I'm going to play Twist of Fate, and I'm going to play Masochism. Just insane healing output. I don't care if I go because I know my DPS is going to kill them. So what I will do is I'll start out with maybe like Archangel and maybe my Rapture there, and and I can spam out some giant shields. And then if I need to recover there, I can use 2 Radiances back to back for massive healing. That's also going to heal my ally as well. And then you have your barrier, you have your wall, your desperate prayer, you have your pain suppression. You won't die if you cycle these CDs correctly. Disc Priest I mean, you will, like, at higher ratings, you can get trained down. It is still easy to kill Discipline Priest, but I mean, at these lower ratings with these guys that have no idea what they're doing and they're just smashing their keyboard with their fucking face, you will live if you cycle these correctly and play these talents. So there's almost, I mean, Mindbender as well, probably in that scenario, but you will almost never die. Oh, Contrition as well. If you're playing Contrition, Mindbender, Masochism, Twist of Fate, if you're playing all of these with these talents, there's no way you die. So on that same note, we'll go to Dome of Light. So baseline Power Word Barrier provides a 25% damage reduction to all allies standing within the barrier, and it's only a 3-minute CD. When you spec into Dome of Light, it is something that now prevents 50% of all damage taken while inside the barrier, and it's a 1.5-minute CD. This talent is amazing versus Rogue Mage because you can dome yourself, or if your ally gets caught in the smoke bomb and you can't get them out of there and you weren't able to grip them out before the kidney shot went off, or etc., whatever's going on, you can just activate Dome of Light, or your Power Word Barrier, I should say. You can activate that on top of the smoke bomb, and they're going to be just fine inside of that dome. This is a great talent to take when you're fighting double melee, when you're getting trained down. You can activate this ability preemptively. That is the key word for today when you're watching this guide, is preemptive, right? Using your barrier preemptively. If you can barrier a giant Stormbolt from a warrior as they're popping their burst, that's going to be super effective in negating all of that damage. If they popped Avatar and you know they're running at you, like they're a noob and they popped Avatar before they threw the Stormbolt and they're running at you, you can see that it's coming, you can dome it, and you can negate a lot of that damage. So I play this a lot. This is not a a new beginner talent, unlike like Ultimate Radiance might be. Now let's move on to Trinity. Trinity is the one talent in your PvP talent section that once you're comfortable on this class and you think, you know what, like I know how to play this class, I'm comfortable on this class, I'm not dying in the opener anymore, and I'm running out of mana, and that's how I'm losing the game, right? You're gonna go from the stage where you're just, dying in the opener, then realizing that you can survive once you cycle your cooldowns correctly, and you're gonna move on to a point where I'm just going, Trinity is that talent. Trinity is my favorite talent. It's a talent that you always want to take if you can take it. It's going to increase the duration of your atonement by 15 seconds, making it so that your atonement is now on the target and applied to the target for a duration of 30 seconds. But unlike, baseline atonement where it applies on things like Shadow Mend, it will no longer apply on your target unless you've used Power Word Shield. So the only way you would apply your atonement from now on is going to be with your Power Word Shield. Naturally, the way that you're going to start applying atonement in the beginning when starting out as disc is just through your Power Word Shield, and that costs a lot of mana, 2,650 mana to just apply atonement. And you're gonna be doing this every 15 seconds. You're gonna go so fast, and sometimes you can't just Shadow Mend for atonement because the target's running around in a corner and he's running and chasing after somebody. They're going all Mongo, and you're having a difficult time keeping up your atonement. Trinity makes sure that you apply one shield. It's gonna last 30 seconds, and additionally, it increases the healing transferred by your atonement, which means when you're dealing damage, you're going to be healing for even more. Now, the second part of the effect is Smite, Penance, and Shadow Fiend. Critical strike chances increase by 25% when you have atonement on 3 or more allies. So even in 2v2s, I use this because I don't really care about the secondary effect, the increased crit chance. While it's great and it is an option, like a benefit of playing this talent in 3s, in 2s, I still play Trinity every game. If I'm fighting, like for me, when I'm comfortable on the class and I'm fighting a Demon Hunter, for example, or even a Death Knight and they're training me, depending, I might play Castigation, but most games, if I'm playing with like a rogue, I want to play Schism. So I'll play Masochism because I know I'm not getting away from this Death Knight. And I'll play something like with Trinity, and I'll play Dark Arc, and I'll play Dome of Light. Let's talk about Purification now. Purification gives you 2 charges on your Dispel. This is great versus like Warlocks. This is great versus like Mage teams. If I'm fighting an MLD and I want my team to be super aggressive, I play something like this because if you've noticed, when you fight against a mage or a warlock, this talent definitely has its purpose. If you're not good at deathing fears and deathing sheeps just yet, practice with Purification, then move on to Premonition. because what this does is it allows your team, and you're not playing, let's say you're not playing Dark Arc as well, then maybe you play something like this versus like a Warlock or, you know, one of those casters. You can double the spell. So if you're fighting like a Warlock and he fears your ally and then you dispel your ally, what is the Warlock going to do again? He's going to fear him again, and then you can't dispel that. So this allows you to keep your team super offensive by just dispelling back-to-back sheeps and dispelling back-to-back fears. Now let's talk about Premonition. Once you've gotten comfortable on the class, I recommend you worry about this last, because your awareness is going to be so fucking doo-doo, because you're just staring at your bars and you're panicking and you're not able to heal, and it's just way too much. What you're using this ability for is the fact that it deals damage to yourself. As you see the mage coming in and trying to cast a polymorph, or if he's already casting on you and you line behind the pillar and you know he's gonna blink for it, when the cast is nearly at the end of the cast, right? It's right about to finish, you're gonna cast your Premonition, and after a delay, it will deal damage to you, and that's gonna break you out of the CC that you're in. Blinds as well. If you see a rogue running at you and your ally's already low, chances are he's gonna blind you and he's not gonna try and do anything else. So you can try and death or Premonition. The word is Shadow Word Death. That's an old school term that players use because the ability used to be called Shadow Word Death. But if a hunter goes over and he grappling hooks you, right? It's a survival hunter and he hooks you and he's gonna come in for a trap, you know that you can cast Premonition or activate an instant cast. Boom, he might trap you at the same time as it goes off, and you'll break out. So you want to get good at this spell because it's how you avoid CC as a Discipline Priest, right? You're going to be lining using your feather, trying to avoid CC. You see a mage casting a sheep in the distance, you're going to line, you see him blink, you cast this, he lands the sheep, boom, you break out of the sheep because of the damage you take after the delay. You want to play this talent, but worry about this last, you guys, okay? Get comfortable in the class overall, then worry about premming. That's the last thing I think you need to really figure out when playing a Discipline Priest, and it is the final step. Once you get this down, you know that you've kind of mastered the class to a certain extent, and you're at a place now where you can start winning a lot of games. Okay, so really quickly, I feel like I've covered a lot, and I know that was a lot, but this class is a little bit more complex, but it's a ton of fun. I'm going to go into now our stats and then the Azerite traits and essences. What you want for Discipline Priest is you want haste, versatility, and then mastery as like the stat that you're not going after, but you'll take it if it's on the piece of gear and you're not too upset about it. Okay, haste, verse are the primary stats for this class. Again, you want to be around like 20% verse and 20% haste, something like that. I just geared this character up. I just leveled them through the AV event, so I'm still working on getting him geared, but I'm already at 433 and almost less than a week, and I will talk about I'll make a video in the future on how you guys can gear pretty fast before 8.3, because the 8.3 catch-up system for gearing isn't the best, but we'll cover that a little bit later in my opinion. Now, moving on to Azerite traits. You want Depth of Shadows and Death Rows. These are the traits that you want. As a newbie, you really want, you know, Depth of Shadows. Like, that's what you want in the beginning, because this talent is going to make it so that, or this Azerite trait is going to make it so that your Shadow Men are going to be a recovery tool for you. So when you're using Purge the Wicked, you're going to be getting these stacks of Depth of Shadows. Every time Purge the Wicked ticks, you're going to be getting a stack. So if I were to dot this guy over here, dot this pet over here, for example, I'm going to be getting these stacks. They're going to stack up all the way to 30, and it's going to increase the amount of healing my Shadow Men deals. And once it hits 30, my Shadow Men healing is going to be increased by a significant amount when compared to not playing or not having Depth of Shadows. I only have one of these on my class because I opted for triple Death Rows. I like to play aggressive. I like to have fun. This class is primarily for me. It's a 2v2 class. It can be great in 3s with Rogue Mage and Jungle and stuff like that, but I like doing a lot of 2s. That's why I made this healer in the first place, so I'm playing triple Death Rows. But you want Depth of Shadows, Death Rows. Even though it's a shadow trait, it still works for Disc. It's still a very powerful trait for Disc. It still affects, although it says Shadow Ward Pain, it works with Purge the Wicked, and it's going to make your Purge the Wicked deal just absolutely insane damage. You're going to be dealing so much damage if you do have triple of these, but like I said, prioritize Depth of Shadows, then go for Death Rows. Wheel and Woe is a penance trait that kind of works with Smite, which is something that you're not going to be using all the time. I mean, you do use Smite in 2s, but in 3s, it's kind of a filler spell that if you have an extra global, you'll go for the Smite. But it also, when you damage an enemy with penance, it increases the absorption of your next power word shield by a certain amount. So this is also a decent trait. But again, the priority here is going to be Depth of Shadows, I think Death Rows, then Moment of Repose, and then Wheel and Woe. Now, this is the fun part for essences. Again, I'm working on unlocking my my neck, the main essences that you're going to want are these right here. Crucible of the Flame currently is your best primary essence. It deals so much damage, especially when paired with Schism, because when you deal damage with Schism, it's going to, you know, increase all damage you deal, which includes your Crucible of the Flame. And I've hit like 75k fucking Crucible of the Flames on enemies. That is massive damage there, and it's free healing as well. And the dot that it leaves on the enemy is also a lot of damage as well, which is great with things like Purge the Wicked. So you have all these dots rolling, all this burst going. You're just dealing so much damage. You can deal easy 10k, 12k. I've hit 20k DPS. I'll try and show a clip here somewhere on the screen of me dealing 20k DPS versus a Warlock if you have the right, you know, trinkets and everything. So Crucible of the Flame is going to be one of the ones that you want to take. You can play something like Conflict and Strife as your miner, because the miner for Conflict is going to give you extra verse. Lifebinder's Evocation is also an amazing miner, and Vitality Conduit is also an amazing miner. And then you have Ever Rising Tide, which could also be a miner, but I don't really play that. I don't prefer it over the other 4 here. So primary Crucible of the Flame, which is easy to get because you're just leveling up your neck and you get it for free. Conflict and Strife is an easy one to get because you just do PvP to unlock it and you get it. Lifebinder's Evocation you get from Mythic Plus, which is pretty easy because you just do a Mythic Plus, like a Mythic 7 I think you get this, or Mythic 10, I don't even know. It's super easy to get. Vitality Conduit is a little bit more difficult to get because you have to do the raid, but if you just do one heroic raid, you'll get this. But again, you can work with these 3 for, you know, the time being and then move on to the other ones, and it's so easy to get your essences. But that's kind of what you're looking for. I'm going to quickly kind of just give you some general info about the class. You really need to play the class to get comfortable on it. And if you do have questions, you can catch me at my live stream, which I'll put somewhere here on the screen. You can watch me play. I can answer questions there. And also, I'll link some other streamers that do play Discipline Priest if you're interested in watching streams, because that's the best way to kind of learn how to play a class, to see somebody else play it. I'll put their streams. I know there's Pam, he plays, and he's been streaming a little bit more, and he's an amazing Discipline Priest. There's also Socks. He's a really nice guy, and he answers a lot of questions, and he plays Disc Priest, and he'll answer your questions. So I'll link their streams somewhere here, or I'll put them in the info box, and you can check them out. That's kind of where you want to go for questions and how to get answers. You can also ask me in the comment section below. But what I will say for general info is, if you are starting out and you're playing Twist of Fate and you're playing this Contrition build with something maybe like I don't know, Dome, and then maybe you're playing the Radiance build, you just want to make sure you're keeping up your Masochism. You want to make sure that you are getting your dots up so you do get those giant Shadow Mens with your Depth of Shadows trait, and that's really important, right? Saving your Depth of Shadows, your Shadow Men, as something after you get the Masochism buff as a way to recover, right? Now, one thing that I want to comment on how to survive as a Discipline Priest is that your CDs like Rapture, other than Pain Suppression, Rapture, Archangel, these are short cooldowns, right? Your Wall is also 1.5 minute CD, your Desperate Prayer, which don't forget to use, increases your maximum health by 25% and instantly heals you for that amount. So that's a great thing to use to kind of just buff your HP up before you get railed on. And it's also a great way to recover if you're taking damage. These are short CDs. Like Rapture, you want to use, and use it preemptively. Don't use it if you're already falling behind. I mean, you can, but use it as damage is rolling in. So if you see a Warlock pop like Dark Soul or the Infernals coming out, then you want to activate Rapture then to try and absorb a lot of that damage, especially when paired with Archangel. Everyone is going to be fine on your team if you have Rapture and Archangel, and you want to pair those together. Pain Suppression is a cooldown that's a 3-minute CD, so you kind of want to use it. Don't be afraid to use it too early in the game. You know, you can use it when you're stunned. So if a warrior stuns you with a Stormbolt and he's popping off, you want to PS before it's too late so you can mitigate at least 40% of that damage. Barrier as well. You want a barrier if you can to mitigate the damage, right? It's not an instant heal. These aren't heals. They're ways to prevent damage so you don't get to that point where you're struggling to recover. Disc, like I said, is about snowballing. And the best way to play Disc is do the most damage possible. But again, when starting out, just try and play a passive style where you do deal damage with penances here and there. You do keep your dots up. You are purging here and there. You're just trying to prevent the damage so you don't get in a spot where you have to struggle to recover. But again, if you are playing something like Twist of Fate, then Twist of Fate is going to allow you to recover from those scenarios. So a general thing might be, if I'm fighting a Death Knight and he comes at me, I might knock him back with Shining Force or his Abomination when he activates that. I'll then maybe barrier his abomination go, so I take a little bit less damage, you know, and then I'll just start going for Shadow Mends, get the kick out of the way while I'm in the barrier, because I do have improved barrier, right? And I'll get the kick out of the way so then I can top myself to the Shadow Mends and go through those necrotics. I'll do something like that early on, preemptively, right? Abomination comes out, I knock it away, then I barrier when he connects, and then I try and get the Shadow Mend, you know, the kick out of the way, whether it's on my penance or anything else. You know, you can rotate through penance to get a kick on penance to go into Shadow Mends and vice versa. But you want to try and get that kick out of the way while you're taking less damage so you can recover when he has no interrupts available. So now we're going to cover kind of the damage opener rotation as a Discipline Priest and how to deal damage and heal. You want to make sure you have your atonement going on my ally. Let's say this is my rogue and I have it on myself, and I'm fighting like a Death Knight and like maybe a druid or maybe a shaman or, you know, a monk or whatever I'm fighting. I'm playing with a rogue, for example. A rogue is the best class you can play with in 2v2 as a disc priest. One of the best classes because it allows you to set up these giant burst combos. So let's say he gets a sap on the healer, or if he cheaps the healer, right? Then maybe he cheaps the healer and he goes over and he goes for a kidney shot in the DPS. I'll fear the healer off that cheap to make sure he sits in CC. And once I have that going and he has the atonement on him, right? And then I have it, you know, maybe I want atonement as well. I don't have to, right? We're both full HP at this point. My opener is going to be something like Dark Arc for him. I'm going to go for a Schism, into some penances, into 2 Conch Flames, into a Soulless, and I also want to make sure that I have my Shadow Fiend rolling as well if I have it up, right? So I'll, you know, press Shadow Fiend as well, and I have all of this damage, and I'm just going to rinse and repeat and just dump damage into this guy while that healer is in CC, you know, spamming smites as well. And I'm just dealing massive damage this whole time. Right now, it's saying I'm doing 20k DPS on that, and I can deal a lot more if I'm playing something like Voodoo Trinket, right? Now, again, this trinket comes from the Underrot. You want to do it on a Mythic 10 and get the 431. You can also opt for, I have so many trinkets for DPS in this class, it's crazy. Compendium of the Storms is a damage trinket you can also get. You want trinkets on this class, you know, in terms of dealing damage, right? Once you get to the point where you're dealing a lot of damage, you're comfortable or you're able to deal damage, you want to get trinkets like Compendium of the Storms. This is a very cheap trinket, I'm sorry, that you can buy on the auction house for like 3,000 gold, and it deals an absurd amount of damage. It's usually like 8 to 9% of my damage per game. Once you kind of have this down and, you know, you're able to do the raid, you get some gear, you can move on to the the Shiver Venom Relic, which is like a better version of the Compendium. It just deals, it's the same kind of effect, right? It's going to be applying this dot, but it has an on use effect. But let's say you get the Voodoo Crusted Doll or the Rock Crusted Voodoo Doll, whatever the fuck it is, and you're ready to burst this motherfucker down. You're gonna do that same open like I talked about, where, you know, you do the sap and then you do the kidney shot and maybe presses Vendetta. You're gonna Dark Arc. You're gonna Dark Arc here. Then you're gonna cast a Schism and you're gonna activate your Voodoo Doll. And then I'm gonna go into my penances, into my Conch Flames, into my into my Soulless. And if he doesn't dispel it here, right now I'm doing 45k DPS on this training dummy, which is really crazy for a healer. I mean, even my monk or any other healer I've ever played deals nowhere near the same amount of damage I just dealt right there. But generally, that is what you want to be doing. And then outside of that, you're gonna be throwing off offensive penances. Remember, penance is something that you want to use to kind of help stabilize your group. If you want to use penance to try and like top somebody or at least give some substantial healing, you want to do a direct penance through, you know, targeting them and actually applying a penance as a heal, not as a damage and then healing through atonement, right? If you're, you know, if the guy's at like 80% health, 70% health, or maybe you're both at 50% health, then you can use penance offensively to try and get you guys both to like 70% health or 60% health. But you don't want to be penancing the enemy if your ally is at like 20% health. You want to penance him to try and top him or cast a few Shadow Mends. And then when everyone's kind of at like 70%, if you're doing threes as well, doing an offensive penance is good there. Schism is going to be healing him as well. My Soulless is going to be healing him as well. So you want to keep that in mind, that in order to heal this guy and try to recover as a group, it's better to deal damage. But if you want to, you know, single target, bring someone back to life if they're about to die, you know, direct healing is the best way to do that. Okay, so that was a lot, and this guide was really hard to do because there's so much to the Disc Priest. So I highly recommend, you know, I'm not just pitching it. If you have questions, ask me in the comment section or come to my stream or check out some of the streamers that I mentioned there. I'd love to answer your guys' questions. In regards to comps, what comps you should play, you can play anything starting out, but you're gonna have the best success playing with an assassination rogue. You're gonna have the best success in 3v3s playing with a rogue and a mage. Rogue and priest always do well together. together. Mage and Priest always do well together. You can play with a Demon Hunter or a Windwalker or a Death Knight, but the best is Rogue, Priest, and 2s, and the best 3v3 comp is Rogue, Mage, Priest. Other comps you can play is like Rep Paladin, Hunter, Priest, Jungle as well, Feral, Hunter, Priest, but those comps are not as effective as Rogue, Mage, and 3s. And for 2s, you know, you can play with a Hunter. That's a decent comp as well, but the best, once again, is just playing with a Rogue. Those are the comps I recommend. You need to have a comp that you're making that has setup. That's what you do best in, where the other allies are CC'd, so you're able to deal damage. And you need a comp that can peel for you, right? If you're fighting a double melee, like, oh my god, here comes, I'm fighting a Windwalker DK, or I'm fighting a, you know, TSG, I'm fighting a Warrior and a Death Knight, I'm gonna die. You need to have a comp that presents so much of a threat that if they go you, it'll cost them the match. I mean, right now I'm dealing 42k DPS. It's absolutely, I'm almost breaching 50 there. So it's so much damage that if you're able to get this off, the healer is the most fun and one of the best healers, I think, for players to try and spice things up a bit. If they want to try out a healer, but they want to deal damage and they don't want to just sit behind a pillar like a monk or a druid where you kind of sit in the back. I know Feral Affinity is fun, but nothing is compared to Disc Priest damage, and that's why it's currently my favorite healer in 8.2.5, and I'll give it a shot in 8.3 as well. But that's the end of this video, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want some individualized, personalized, inexpensive coaching, you can check out my Patreon page, which will be somewhere here on the screen, and you can check out the link in the info box below. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and it's super inexpensive, but I enjoy doing it. It's something that I really like to do, where I help people get better at healing or playing any class, honestly, in general. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out, and it's also a great way to support me as well. You can check out my live stream also. If you have any questions, you can comment in the comment section below if you have any questions, and I'd love to get back to you guys and help you in any way that I can. But that's gonna do it for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. If you love the video, be sure to subscribe for more content, and without further ado, I'll see you guys in the next one.